Welcome, welcome. This is Aloha. Welcome to the Fast, Healthy, and Ono Cooking trip around the world. My name is Cindy, and I'm an AARP Hawaii volunteer. I'll be your host tonight. Tonight we'll be making arroz con camarones, shrimp with rice. I hope I pronounced that correctly. This dish is popular along the coast throughout South America, but this recipe is from Colombia. On behalf of our sponsors, Kaunoa Senior Services, question up. I'm having problems, so there we go. For those of you who are new or maybe unfamiliar with AARP Hawaii, we are a membership organization for people 50 and older, but what we do for everyone. We hope that with this series, you can learn some techniques that you can use to build or maintain a healthy lifestyle. Let's do a quick bit of housekeeping. This is a picture of what you should be seeing at the bottom of your Zoom screen on a PC and Mac, and possibly the top of the screen on an iPad. Everybody is currently on mute. If you want to submit a question or comment, please click on the button that says Q&A and type in your question. I will be monitoring the questions and making sure they get asked. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you may type your questions in the comments. We won't be using the raise hand command because questions will be committed in the Q&A. The chat command also isn't necessarily going to be needed unless you want to communicate a technical issue. Alice Swift, Dave DeWitt, and Jackie Bolin are standing by to help. So please make sure you use the Q&A for questions and comments. We recommend that you select speaker side-by-side view rather than gallery view for this presentation. Do this by clicking on the upper right part of your screen where it says View. Once you're in that view, you can change the size of the slides or of the speaker simply by clicking on and dragging on the middle bar. Finally, we have added closed captioning in this presentation to those who have difficulty hearing. You can turn this off on your end by clicking on the CC Live Transcript button in the lower right side of your screen and clicking on Hide Subtitle. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Chef Daniel Swift, who will be leading us through this cooking series. Take it away.
Thank you.
Did I stop share?
No,
Okay.
It was me. I had to run and grab the water for the rice. Well, welcome. Thanks, Cindy, for the introduction. Aloha, everybody. Welcome back to tonight's class where we're going to be focusing on arroz con camarones, which is shrimp rice dish. We do a lot of rice dishes in Hawaii, primarily just the straight up steamed white rice. For this program, we try to utilize whole grain rice as much as possible. Tonight, I just went back to the traditional long grain white rice. I did have some brown long grain, but we had just used that. I think that was last week even. So I didn't want to repeat myself. So you can certainly substitute this one out with a long grain brown rice. You can choose a blend if you'd like to use some of those multi rice blends that we tend to use a lot here. The thing with the sticky short grain rice or the Japanese style rice, you could probably use that if you had to, and it's the only rice that you stock at home. Just make sure that you wash it really well like you would in normal use. And you want to try to make sure that all of those starches are removed so that it can avoid sticking together. We want this to be a little bit fluffy towards the end. So that's sort of the goal here with this. So hopefully you enjoyed the empanadas last week. I ate them all week long. I think I finished them the day before yesterday. I did get some pictures. I think Judy sent me some pictures of some that she had made. I love that dish. The onion ones were really flavorful. The ones that I'd put chicken in were really good as well, but straight up vegetarian one worked really good. So what we have here tonight is two parts. One, we'll start with the recipe that we're doing for the mixed spice blend. It's kind of building on the one that we did last week, I believe, the Murthan spice. Adding a couple more ingredients to that, and then we'll start on the rice. I have this on low already. I just want to kind of get some heat going. It's always a little close when we have 20 or 25-minute long dishes to get them squeezed out in time for the show to end on the properly scheduled time. So the ingredients that we have here are all pretty straightforward and simple, the ones that are going into the rice. All of these are available locally. The spice is a little bit different. So let's kind of look at what we have here. I just have a small bowl. This could easily be done in like a deli cup or a jar. If you have an old spice container and you're doing your own blends, save those jars. And then as you start to make your own mixes, you're going to add them into the cleaned out, washed out jar. And then you'll have the top with the pukas for shaking. It makes it more convenient. You don't have to invest in a separate container for those. But if you don't have that, you can just use a deli cup or anything to store them in. Store them with the rest of your spices. Keep in mind that with the humidity here in Hawaii, it can tend to get a little bit sticky, especially if there's no salt inside. So they do make the little packets that you can get at the craft stores that are made to go in with spice containers, and that will keep the humidity out and keep them from clumping up. So tonight what we have, we started with the Merkin spice blend, and if you have the recipe from that one from last week, it has the smoked paprika or the ground chili in it. It had the cumin seed, the chili flake, the coriander that's ground, and the salt. So that's sort of the base that we're starting with here. And what we're doing is layering some flavors onto that. So as you look throughout South America, smoked or dried chilies ground in the form of paprika or smoked paprika or other specialty chilies is really the base for a lot of the spice blends. So we just took the one that we had from before, which gave us the primary foundation, and we'll build on that. Actually, Jackie, this is yours. I think you forgot to grab it last week. So thanks for that, because I didn't have to make it again, but I'll give you this tonight. So on top of that, we're adding the garlic powder, the onion powder, the oregano, and I didn't put on the recipe because it's not as easily available. You can buy it online if you want to get a separate container of it. And that's the annatto seed, and it can be whole or ground. It's a lightly peppery seed. It's primarily, honestly, something that gives color, almost like saffron would. Saffron gives a little flavor. It's mild, and we're going to be using that coming up. But for this particular recipe, I also put that you could, I didn't even actually put this on that recipe because it's an optional item, but you could use turmeric as well, or olena, which is what we call it in Hawaii. Very, very popular. So that can be ground or grated fresh. It's going to give a little bit of a yellow color to the dish, which is sort of the traditional aspect of what we're looking for. So you have those ingredients mixed in with the chili, the cumin, and the other one. So I'm just going to blend these together really quick. And one thing I noticed, I had made this setup a little bit earlier and just put this in the fridge, and the garlic powder and the onion powder just for about an hour and a half in the refrigerator. It kind of clumped up. So you do have to be careful. And you can see here, that's what we deal with when we go to use our onion powder at home. If it's been sitting on the shelf and it's summer, if it's been humid or raining a lot, you end up with a clumping like that. So try to keep it away from humidity and use it as quickly as possible, or put one of those little dehydration packets in there, because they will clump up really easily. So I then just going to mix this together. And I'll move that out. If you guys have any questions, Cindy.
As you're mixing, I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Victoria wants to know, how much turmeric should we use?
Yeah, turmeric doesn't give a lot of flavor, but what I did for the additions to all of those spices was a tablespoon, or excuse me, a teaspoon. You're going to get a little bit of the yellow from it, but not a huge amount of flavor. So I know some folks that I work with here that love olena or turmeric. They put it in everything. Actually, they drink it with water and juices in the morning. So they would use a lot more, but if you go with the same ratio by adding a teaspoon, you'll be fine. So this ratio was a tablespoon of the previously made spice and then a teaspoon of each of the other ones that we added tonight. I usually tend to make and you can even see actually as I mix this up, the little lumps of the onion powder that I really have to work or sift to break up. But I tend to make this as a double batch. All of the recipes that we do out here, I try to make a little bit larger batch so it's easier to see. It's not just a tiny batch for two. So I would need to come in here with my hands and crumble up these little bits of onion powder. Or I would, like I said, I would sift it. So we've got that mixed well enough for as well as we'll get. And then we're gonna just season up the shrimp for starters. So I'm gonna add 2 teaspoons, depending on how you want to mix it up. These have been purchased frozen. I went to the store. They're running about $9 a pound, which isn't too bad. And these are 21.25s. So as you purchase shrimp, you'll notice there's numbers associated with them. And it's usually 21.25, U12s, whatever the number that's associated with it, or the numbers, that's how many shrimp roughly give you 1 pound. So these being 21.25s means that between 21 and 25 shrimp should equal a pound. And the ones that I purchased were already peeled and deveined, and the tail was removed. You can get them whole, you can get the head on, you can get the shell on. It depends on how you like it, but it's easiest for us to get it already done. You'll pay a little bit more. I think it was about $1 a pound more if they're already deveined and the shell's removed, because you're not paying for that weight of the shell. Okay. So I'm going to just set that to the side, and then I have a little bit of the spice blend left. These are for later, and set that over here. And then with this pot on, I've got my oil, I've got the rice, the onions, the garlic, some pimentos, and a bay leaf. Now, I thought earlier today I could even grind that bay leaf up and add it to that spice blend. That would have been nice, but it's not any trouble for us to throw it in with the rice as we cook it and then remove it at the end. So I can turn this up just slightly and go through the process that we've used pretty regularly. We're adding the oil. We're going to add the rice and the onions. And the onions are small dice. You could cut them a little bit bigger if you wanted to, or you could cut them a little bit smaller. It's kind of up to you to decide what you like. The real trick to this is going to be to make sure that our shrimp at the end is not overcooked. So we kind of add that towards the end of the cooking process. So I've got that in here. I've turned the heat up now, so it'll get going. And I want to cook that onion and heat up that rice a little bit by itself. It's okay for me to go ahead here and throw in my garlic. And this garlic is about 5 cloves that I crushed. It depends on the amount of garlic that you want in your dish, how much flavor you want to translate into the rice itself. So any kind of garlic or shallot or a red onion. It doesn't have to be a yellow onion. It could be a Maui onion, but most of the onions that you're using in Latin America are not quite as sweet as you'd find with the Maui onion. And you'll hear that start to heat up and sizzle a little bit. The tomato that I have is just a peeled, diced, skin removed canned tomato with juice. So if you were to buy the ones that have whole and they're not cut, or you happen to have them in your pantry, that's fine. Just drain the liquid off first, the juice, save it, and then you can chop up the whole tomatoes. They work great. Even if you were to get a hold of the ones that have a little bit of oregano in it, especially with a dish that already has oregano in it, it might have garlic in it. They make some that have diced peppers, the things that we've talked about with previous classes, there's nothing wrong with utilizing that. It's not going to impact the flavor of your dish. Okay.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
One is, the first one is the bay leaf dried or does it matter? And the
Oh.
second one is, can you cook the rice and aromatics in a rice cooker?
Yes, quickly on the second one, yes, you can. You could do all of that in the rice cooker, no problem. And if you watched, I think, Jackie, correct me if I'm not wrong, that might have been our first show where we used a rice cooker and did a rice dish in the rice cooker. And as soon as it was almost done, we put shrimp or tofu or vegetables on top, closed it, and let it finish cooking and setting. You would do that with this particular dish. And then the previous one, what was the first part of that question, Cindy? I'm sorry.
Is the bay leaf dried or does it matter?
Fresh would be best, but I don't have access to fresh bay leaf. I wish I did. If you've got a tree, a lot of people may grow it here. Grows really well in California and other parts of the US, but I only have dry. So either one would work. And that was a pretty good size one you might see here. Compared to my hand, I grabbed one large one. You could go with two smaller ones if you needed to, but you should be able to get the flavor you need from one.
So it's for the bay leaf, do you need more when it's fresh?
Anytime you're using herbs, that's a great question. So I'm adding my water, or half of it at this moment. You can hear it bubble up really loud because the pot was hotter than I normally would do if I were cooking it. But like I said, we want to rush it. But anytime you're using fresh herbs as opposed to dried herbs, the dried herbs will have more flavor. So traditionally what we do in the kitchen is we will be adding our dried herbs in the beginning stage of a dish, most of the time, not all of the time. And then our fresh herbs we would add towards the end. So you may notice that when we do dishes here and we are adding fresh parsley or cilantro or something like that, we tend to always add that at the end. So you get concentration of the oils with most of your dried herbs, so the flavors are more intense, which means theoretically that you could slightly reduce the amount of the dry herb as opposed to the fresh herb. But I've never really noticed there to be such a difference to where it might tend to overpower it if you were to go with a dry versus a fresh. So usually if you follow along what the recipe recommends, you'll be fine. This one, like for example, was always, we only deal with dried bay leaves, but if it were some other herb, it's still a good rule of thumb that you can actually roll with equal amounts of each. I actually happen to have a little bit of fresh chopped parsley that I did that I'm going to do for a shrimp skewer, something a little different. But if I'm using the fresh herb like this, I would tend to use it at the end of the dish as opposed to putting it in the beginning.
Okay, another question. What
Yes.
size can of the tomatoes?
Great question. I dumped the whole can in here. This is a 16-ounce container and it's almost full to the top. So it looks like probably a 14 ounce can, the regular like Campbell soup kind size. Most of them seem to be pretty standard, but this looks like it's about 14 ounces. So anywhere probably between 10 and 16 ounces would work for that. Great question. And I'm gonna throw in just that last little bit. Okay. So I've still got my tomato and my pimento. I'm gonna actually let this cook for a minute, covered, try to expedite the cooking process. I'm gonna leave it on high. So normally I would reduce it to a simmer, let it go a little bit lower and a little bit slower, but we wanna make sure that we have this close to being done to where we can add the shrimp in about 10 minutes. So I'm gonna set these right here to the side. And then
Question about,
yeah,
sorry, I have a question about the tomatoes.
Yes.
Did you drain the juice out of the tomatoes or are you using the juice?
I did eat one chunk though, I will say. I love I love canned tomatoes. I love fresh tomatoes. Obviously, we've all had a fresh garden tomato. They're great. Maybe it's growing up on the canned tomatoes, but the thing that I love about these is they're always picked at peak of ripeness, processed, and then preserved. So you do want to save the juice, and then that will be utilized towards the end as we stir and get ready to stir in and put the shrimp with the dish as well. Great question. And even the pimentos, I didn't fire roast and make my own pimentos where you would just grill or roast a red pepper and then let it sweat and peel it and dice it. I just got one of the small jars of already diced pimentos. So I saved that little bit of juice that's in there as well. Okay. So that works good. And I have a couple extra shrimp. So I knew that because we have a little bit of time in between the point to where we'll add the shrimp and the tomatoes and the other items to let this dish finish. I want to show you kind of a trick, not a trick, but what we do when we're doing grilling or skewering or making kebabs with shrimp. And while I'm waiting, actually, I'm going to throw in a little bit of this. That'll add that richness, color, and flavor to the rice. So these are just the straight up shrimp. Again, the 2125s. I'm going to put a little sprinkle of this on here. I'll probably regret that because my fingers will now be red with a little bit of yellow. I'll try to be careful. And this is a little bit, just lightly coated. Not quite as much as I did with the real strong flavor that I want in the shrimp dish. And then I've got a couple skewers here. And then I may use an olive or two. We're putting some in the dish also, but I was thinking I might utilize some on this kebab just to show you sort of the trick that we use for that. So I've got a little grill pan on here, the one that we've used. It's heating up. Hopefully it won't get too hot. But this is a neat little trick. We just did this at home last week. We were grilling some shrimp. I had some friends over. So traditionally what you'll see is most of your shrimp will just be skewered straight through. So if you were to look at this shrimp, you might just go through the tail and then through the head, and you end up with a little bit of a puka or this gap that's in between the head and the tail. So in order to eliminate that and to allow the shrimp to cook a little bit more evenly, what I do is I take 2 shrimp and then I put the tail in between the head right here. And we sort of make almost like a little yin and yang shape. So they're sort of overlapping right here. So there's a couple different ways you can do it like that. You can do it like this. As long as they're wrapped around one another like this, then it kind of holds them together almost in a circle. So this almost creates like a little shrimp steak is what I say. And then the trick is to then just go through the tail of one, the head of the other one, and then the head of the first one, and the tail again. And what you end up with is this nice little kind of shrimp steak, almost like a shrimp patty, really. And that works really well. And I can just take another one. Yep, like Alice said, like the Pisces symbol, the intertwined fish. And you see this sort of symbol a lot with different things. But it's best when you can eat it. It's even better. So I'm only going to put 2 on there. Maybe I'll have enough for 3. Let's see. We'll add another one. And go ahead, Cindy, if you have other questions. Put that on here.
There is one question from Amy. She wants to know, where do you find pimentos in the store?
Oh, just go to the olive section, Amy. I was looking today in a couple of different sections, and I ended up landing, at least at times, on the aisle where the olives and what else did they have there? Like the stripped roasted peppers, salad dressings kind of blended into that next little section there. Hot sauces, Tabasco. So that's where it was at times. And they have little jars. You can get them diced. And like I said, you can actually get them in strips. lots of different forms, but one of the small jars, very inexpensive. It was like $1.89 for the small 2-ounce jar. And it was good to go. So
Now,
that's
Janice is asking, could you take an olive and stick it between the head and tail to fill the gap?
Yes, absolutely. Let me do that on the end of each one of these. Great recommendation, Janice. I'll put one here, like we're talking about, and then we can go through the head and then through the olive as opposed to the head of the other one, and you end up with something that looks like that. So we want to keep in mind whenever you're cooking shrimp or any protein, they shrink when they're heated and when they're cooked. So it will tighten up around that olive. It'll tighten up around itself if you're doing the intertwine technique that I'm showing you here. And now when you slide them off the skewer, you can either serve them on the skewer whole or you can slide them off. But they'll hold their shape. They'll hold together. The two little pieces will hold together nicely. So this will just need a little bit of olive oil, not too much. And I'll see if I can throw these on the grill without setting off the fire alarm. And here, everybody's gone from campus today, so it should be okay. So it goes off. We'll find out. Let me throw these on. There we go. And then those cook up really, really nice and easy. So now we can go back. The rice is cooking rapidly. You can take a look over here. Most of the liquid is absorbed. Got a teeny bit there. I'm going to turn it now. Turn it down on low. I'm going to add my tomatoes, my pimentos, and just gently give it a little stir here. Mix those flavors in. Now let's can I get a little bit more water? Just a teeny bit, right around the corner. Try to get Alice to walk by here so we can see her. There she goes. Oh, that's the first time I think you've seen it. And then hopefully you can see, I'm not stirring this really roughly or anything. I'm just kind of spreading out the, thank you very much. Add just a touch more water because I want to leave this on high. And anytime you're cooking rice or cooking things where you're boiling them at a high heat, you lose more moisture through evaporation, and it might not, or it can throw off the ratio of the absorption of the rice or the pasta or the items that you're cooking. And I'm going to sprinkle in a little olives. These can be diced up or they can be whole. I like them whole, and actually these little olives are stuffed with a little bit pickled garlic, which is really nice. And then I just need to place some shrimp around. So the small shrimp, these 2125s will only take, 3 to 5 minutes tops to cook. I think in Hawaii, we eat a fair amount of shrimp, and we eat a fair amount of shrimp that's probably overcooked a little bit. So it's not, it's not like you're going to ruin it if the dish gets a little too hot. But the ideal for this dish or similar dishes is to try to make sure that the rice is cooked all the way through. The shrimp is cooked just to the point in which it is done. And then, of course, on the tomatoes, the olives, all of the other things, they really just need to be heated up. So that's all there is to that. But that's really the challenge. A lot of the times when you're doing dishes is to make sure that everything is done at the same time and cooked to perfection. So a lot of these dishes that you see in Latin America and other parts of the world are more of like a slower cooked, almost stew type dish, to where things are cooked for a longer period of time, and it doesn't really matter if the shrimp gets a little overcooked. I believe we have paella coming up. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jackie, but that's one of the tricky ones because you might have chicken, you might have shrimp, you might have shellfish and mussels, and the rice and a sausage and other items all in one dish. And they all cook a little bit different. They cook for longer periods of time. So you want to make sure that everything is done to perfection right at the end just before service, and that can be tricky. So we'll cover that again kind of when we get to the dish that we're doing on paella, the Spanish paella. All right, so I'm going to flip the shrimp. Actually, I'm going to bring them over here.
Okay, as you're getting ready to flip, I have a question from Natalie. She wants to know, can we use pimento stuffed green olives?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can use any type you would like, would work fine. Totally up to you. If you don't like olives, my wife doesn't like olives that much, so you could even omit those if you wanted to. If you wanted the black olive, some people don't like the flavor of a green olive, or vice versa. They prefer green over the black. Whatever you'd like, and even in putting this dish together, looking at the technique, if you follow the show, you know that what I like to try to stress is like the technique. So basically what we've done here tonight is a rice pilaf. So where you start with a little bit of oil, you add your rice, you add your onions or garlic, you sweat them a little bit, get the rice hot, similar to a risotto. And then in goes the liquid and the other items. So it's really a very common dish throughout the world. What makes this unique and special to Latin America is the spice blend that we've created. So if you want to throw in something other than olives, feel free. Actually, I brought some chorizo. I'm like, oh, I want to put chorizo in here, would be great. Even with the shrimp, to me, it is a great combination. So feel free, yeah, get creative.
So as we're being creative, Janice wants to know, if you don't want to use olives, what would be another good substitute?
Oh gosh, anything. I was thinking, I mean, just looking at this, to me, it calls out for peppers. Even those nice little colorful ones that you get. They sell them in the packs now where there's yellow, red, and green, sometimes orange. And they're the sweet peppers, the little miniature sweet peppers. Those are delicious. Those would be great in here. I was looking earlier, I have a mango in the fridge. I'm like, right now I should be peeling and dicing a mango. If I dice a nice fresh mango and served it on top of this, as I put it out on the table, that would be great. Any type of plant, zucchini or cauliflower or broccoli. Alice is looking at me like she has something to say. Something to share. Feta cheese? Yeah, you could do the feta stuffed ones. You could do, I mean, even if this could be vegetarian, you could make this dish with tofu. You could use cauliflower florets as a substitute for the meat. I mean, you could do this with ground beef if you have to. So almost anything would be great in there. I know Janice is super creative and her wheels are always turning. So I would encourage you guys to get creative and try to come up with something that is a little special and unique if you don't happen to have that. And,
okay,
and
we
if,
have,
yeah.
I'm sorry, we have some creative suggestions here. Well, one says artichoke hearts might be great. That's from Lotus Ann. And then Amy wants to know, what about capers?
Oh, yes. After my own heart. Capers for sure, artichoke hearts. Honestly, if you think about this dish, like I was mentioning earlier, you can pick your favorite pizza, and whatever goes on your favorite pizza would be good in here. I'm a sausage and mushroom guy. So sausage and mushroom in here would be good. Artichoke hearts would be awesome in here. Any of those items that were mentioned would be great. So it's just a matter of, you know, getting creative and opening the fridge, honestly, kind of like Sam does with Sam's show, where you look at what is available, what can be utilized, what's fresh at the supermarket, what you might pick up at the frozen section of the store. If you're running short on time, you don't have time to do a lot of prep, then there's a lot of different options for stuff like that. All right, this is getting very close. So the shrimp look really close to being done. I don't know if you guys can see. Try to slide this over. A little bit of extra water that I have in here is almost all gone. The shrimp on top look good. So theoretically, those are basically like steamed. So by putting that lid on there, trapping the moisture inside, it steamed the shrimp. And remember, anytime you're cooking proteins, the juices from that protein will come out. So the shrimp juice leached into the rice, which is going to add more flavor. Tonight, I just used water, but this could easily be a shrimp stock if you're doing shrimp, or a mild chicken stock, or a vegetable stock. Totally up to you. A little splash of white wine in there couldn't hurt. Just depends on what you're looking for. But it can be really, really simple, just as we've had it here. And yeah, that rice is basically done over here. So I'm going to dish up a little bit. While the rest of the finish is cooking. Nice shrimp on top. I like olives. I ate about 10 of these today while I was prepping in the kitchen. I like that little crunchy bit you get with that. I don't know if you've ever had them, but the little piece of pickled whole garlic clove inside. It's delicious. So I can turn this down now. I don't want it to go crazy. Rice, remember, will continue to absorb liquid even if I shut it off completely. The little bit of a moisture that's in the bottom is still going to be absorbed by the rice. So if I cool this and store it tomorrow, there's no liquid. It's all been pulled into the rice. So we got that little bit of olives here. We got the rice, the peppers. You can see the tomatoes, some shrimp. Definitely, I can sprinkle a little bit of the spice on top. And then I can come back and pull off these shrimp. And I think I talked to you guys before about this grill pan. This is one of those cast iron ones that work great. Not too smoky. Actually, it smoked a lot less than I thought. And I'm going to just put these on the side. I will pull one off just so that you guys can see what I was talking about. They're hot. Be careful. Don't burn your hands. But if you turn it around, let me turn it around. You can see how those shrimp have bound themselves together right here. And if you're pulling them off, you can use 2 pairs of tongs, or you can use your hand if you give them a second to cool. But I can simply grab that, twist it. That sort of breaks the seal of it on the skewer. I'll put this skewer down. And then you can sort of see what I was talking about earlier, where they stick together and make like a little shrimp steak. So you can see that they've got the seasoning all around. They're still intertwined. The protein shrunk together, and now they're bound as one. So you can serve them on the skewer together, or you can take them off and do them just like that. And then you have, that's 2 different techniques with that particular spice blend here. Always tend to serve it with a little bit of lemon. I've got just some lemon wedges that I cut here. Tend to squeeze a little bit of that off onto here. And put another one on the side in case someone really wants lemon. I don't need extra olives, but I do have this nice chopped parsley. I'm going to just sprinkle a little bit of that on top.
As you're plating,
Yep.
Eva wants to know, is it supposed to be soupy, or should all the liquid be absorbed?
All the liquid will be absorbed. I would probably have gone another 5 minutes, but I can see we're out of time. And let me show you, that's a great question, because even in that 5 minutes to plate and talk about those skewers, you're going to see that the, I'll put this on here, it'll keep it nice and hot. Hopefully it won't break. Sorry, jacking with the brakes. All right, that should be fine. But yeah, let's take a look at this. That's a great question, because as I mentioned, most of the liquid will start to absorb. It was still bubbling around the rice and around the shrimp when I did that first dish up. And just in that few minutes, if you take a look, see if I can lift this up here, you can see the liquid is gone. It's all been absorbed into
As we're looking at no liquid, Anonymous is saying it would be interesting to crisp the rice on the bottom.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That would be great. Now, traditionally in Vietnam, in other parts of the world where they really relish that kind of crisp, burnt, almost textured rice on the bottom would be great. As a matter of fact, I felt that. That's a good comment, Anonymous, because I felt it a little bit as I was stirring it because we cranked the heat up and cooked it at a little hotter temperature than we normally would. But yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point. Get creative, right? And then you can get a little bit of crossover between not only the flavors, but also the techniques. So I know they make the little clay jars or bowls that oftentimes they're baked in Vietnam, and then it's served in that, and it's so crusty hard they just break the vessel and pull the rice out. So yep, absolutely. It gives you a different texture, different flavor. I normally, like I said, try not to eat while I don't want to have chew with the mouthful and talk, but I'm going to try it.
Okay, Chu, I'm going to ask a question. Anonymous, another Anonymous wants to know, can fresh tomatoes be used instead of canned tomatoes?
Absolutely. So that would probably be 2 whole fresh tomatoes as opposed to the 14 or 12 to 16 ounce can. So it depends. I mean, you see some tomatoes that are huge, but what you're looking for there is, you know, between 12 and 16 ounces, 10 maybe on the low end of tomato product. So, I mean, you could squirt in some ketchup in a 1 diced tomato or your favorite chili sauce or, you know, honestly, even cocktail sauce, add a little bit of horseradish flavor to it. Totally up to you. The one thing I noticed in tasting that is that we didn't put salt. And normally I would say it's not that big a deal, especially when you have olives. So you're adding olives that can oftentimes have a lot of salinity to them. But for me, before service, I would definitely hit this with a little bit of salt. If you're watching your sodium, obviously wouldn't need to do that. But I tend to have a slightly heavy hand sometimes when it comes to salt. But for me, I see my wife shaking her head out of the corner of my eye. It's totally up to you, but just taste it, see what you think. But with a rice dish and potato dishes and starch dishes that tend to absorb a lot of salt, you're going to want a little bit just to kind of wake up the palate, and that'll bring through the flavor of the spice blend a little bit better as well. Any other questions?
No, you explained everything so well. Nobody has any more questions.
Oh, awesome. Well, I know that kind of was like rushed in terms of a rice dish, but it did get it done in 40 minutes or so. So yeah, I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I know Jackie has other cool stuff in store, and we got our thing in March. I think it's the 25th, where we're doing a morning session that is nationally televised, or whatever we call this, internetized. But we're looking forward to continuing this program and expanding on some new things that we have coming up starting next month.
Thanks, everyone. And Dan, I just wanted to mention about the March 25th event, the morning one. They have not given me the sign-up link yet, which is why I haven't shared it with all of you, but we definitely would appreciate having you on there to show support for Dan as he speaks to 1,000 people across the nation. We need our Hawaii cohort there. So stay tuned. I'm going to send it all out to you.
Come represent Hawaii. All right.
Woohoo! All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Cindy.
Aloha.